to the Porch broadcast. Well, this is going to be an interesting one today, you guys. I was having breakfast with a friend of mine the other morning, and we were just talking about videos and talking about what we might want to do videos on. And he said this to me. He said, Paul, he said, why don't you do a video on the Cracker Barrel saga? And I laughed. I thought, well, I might just do it. I usually veer away from these type of things. Most of y'all probably hadn't heard anything about this because it's only been on every newscast and social media channel out there. So anyway, let me do my 2 cents worth. Now, my approach on things in life is not to bash or try to destroy people or companies. Mine is to try to offer insight and advice that will help people. And somebody might say, well, you're just an old man. Yeah, that's been around management for well over 40 years. But having said that, here's the thing I want everybody to think about is this. Cracker Barrel employs a lot of people, and it employs people some of us know and some of us don't, but they're from our communities. These people are just trying to make a living and feed their families, and they're good people. It feeds a lot of good people. So there's a lot of benefit to Cracker Barrel succeeding. We should never want something like this to be destroyed unless it is doing immoral things. And then, of course, we just don't need it in the community. Now, I know that Cracker Barrel has supported some things, from my understanding, that are, from my perspective, far less than kosher. But that's not what this video is about. This video is an old man's advice to the Cracker Barrel CEO. Now, I don't know what her name is, so I'm just going to call her Miss CEO. Okay? So, anyway, if I were to talk to her, if she were sitting here in my office and saying, what advice could you give me? And she's not going to come down here. I know that. That's not what this is about. But I would say this to her, because I want her to succeed. I have no benefit in people failing and people hurting in life. And right now, she's got the deck stacked against her pretty hard. I don't know whether she still has a job or not. But irregardless, if she don't have a job, here's what I would say to her. This is not the end of the world. This is a good learning spot in life. Now you have to ask the questions, where did this thing go wrong? And this is, I hope to be able to put in some positive and maybe even a little bit of humorous insight to this. But I would say to her, what I see with CEOs is they go into big conference rooms and they meet with a lot of intellectual people. And those conference rooms are full of people that are usually below your station in that you're their boss. And so, as a general rule, human nature, these people are not going to challenge you. They're going to create an echo chamber where they tell you what it is that they think you want to hear, because you're the boss. You may be the one that signs off on their next promotion. So they're going to try to stay on the right side of it. Now, there is a solution to that environment, but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. I'm just going to talk about some highlights of things that you need to understand. So if you've got a room full of people that are just going to agree with you and not challenge you, you're not going to learn much from them. And they're really not much value to you because of that. So now you're in an echo chamber and these people are just regurgitating what you already thought. Well, you're rarely ever 100% right, and probably rarely ever 50% right. And that's the way with everybody. Now, CEOs, they have some inherent problems of not wanting people to tell them anything. They want to tell people everything. So I would put on the brakes and say, no, I'm not going to tell them what I think. I want to know what they think. That's step number one in beginning to understand where the problems are at. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound a little bit silly, But if you listen and think about it, you're going to understand that it's not that silly. Let's just ask the question, Miss CEO. If you would have gone down and rented an F-150 pickup, put on a suit of work clothes, and headed south, you might have been headed in the right direction. The pickup indicating that you have at least some kind of understanding of the working man. The headed down south would be going to where probably your strongest customer base is. Putting on the work clothes is because now you need to go to work. I'm not saying CEOs don't work, but sometimes they need to understand where the people that work under them are coming from, what their lives are. Because you see, Miss CEO, most of you make decisions based on math. Let me tell you something from an old guy that's been very successful in this. Math is secondary. The first thing you need to do is measure people, understand people. And that's where you guys failed at. That's where you failed at, Miss CEO. You didn't understand your customer base. You didn't understand your employees. Now, let's get back to the F-150 and the work clothes and heading south. Should have drove into a Cracker Barrel down there that you were CEO over, walked in, talked to the manager and said, I'm going to do some things and here's what I'm going to do. And you should have said, I'm going to interview customers as they walk in the door. And what you should have done is when people walked in that door and sat down at their table, well, they made their order. Once they made their order, it'll take 5, 10, 15 minutes for that order to get there. Walk over to that table and introduce yourself and say, look, I'd like to ask you a few questions. I don't want to interrupt your meal, but if you will allow me to have 2 to 3 minutes or maybe 5 minutes of your time while you're waiting on that meal to come to your table, I want to ask you some questions. And when it's all said and done, if you'll allow me that time, your meal is on the house. I'm going to buy it for you and pay for it. That's what you should have done. And you should have had a list of questions. And I could tell you probably half a dozen things you could do, but I'm not going to go into that. You're surely smart enough to understand what you need to know from your customers. Should have made a list of important questions to ask your customers, and you should have sat there with a pen and a piece of paper in front of your customer and wrote this down and then thanked them for their input. Walked away from that. You should have done that from about 8 o'clock in the morning till about noon. And then after noon, what you should have done, because you got your work clothes on, and let me tell you about the work clothes. You walk up to a table, introduce yourself in work clothes, and sit down and talk to people, they'll relate to you. You walk up there in clothes that cost more than their car payment, you've already built a wall between you and them. You CEOs need to understand this. And it's not you, Miss CEO, by yourself. It's a lot of CEOs. I've worked with CEOs, and I've worked with some doozies. Having said that, let me get back on track here. About noon, you should have walked back there and asked to borrow an apron from the people working there. And you should have waited tables till about 5 o'clock. Why 5 o'clock? Because you need to know what it is to put in an 8-hour day on your feet. Then when you go back to your motel room, drive your F-150 back to your motel room in your work clothes, flop down on the bed and your feet hurting, now you start to understand the people that you are representing. They become people, not math. And therein lies the problem. You need to understand these people that work for you. Because here's the thing, Miss CEO, you're making decisions on whether they get to feed their families or not, whether they get to make their car payment or their rent, because you can very well cost them their jobs. And you need to understand how important that is. You're not just a CEO out there drawing a big paycheck. You're a person that's been put in charge of and over the future of dozens, if not hundreds of people. And you need to take that serious. Now you may say, well, old man, you're being pretty hard. Yes, I am being pretty hard. This is important. I'm not against you. I'm putting this out there because I'm for you, but I'm for them people down there working for a living. I'm for them people down there that are trying to make their payments and trying to feed their kids. And I want Cracker Barrel to be a success. I eat at Cracker Barrel 2 or 3 times a month, and I like Cracker Barrel. I want it to succeed. I want it to be what people want it to be. I want to enjoy sitting at a table next to other people having a good time, their families, and things such as that. So here's the thing, I'm not trying to bash you, Miss CEO. I don't want to do that at all. I hope you hear what I've got to say. I doubt that you will, but if I do, I hope you think about it and you get honest with yourself. And I hope you get back in there. If you still got a job, get back in there and make this thing a success. Get back in there and help these people that are feeding their families and these people that are eating meals. Let me tell you something. A lot of times people don't get to go out but maybe 2 or 3, 4 times a month, if even that, because it costs a lot to eat out. And when they eat out, they want to enjoy it. Think of that too. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this thing up. We here at the Porch love people. Miss CEO, we love you too. We want you to succeed. But you're going to have to step down off that high perch a little bit and understand who you're really representing, who you're really making decisions for. So we do love you. We want you to succeed. May God bless. Have a good day.